I've never in the 5-year history of this channel talked about this, which is crazy because the biggest underlying reason for someone to lose motivation, essentially to become unproductive and get caught in this trap of chronic procrastination, is you're bored, right? You're bored of what you're doing. Maybe you've been studying medicine at college for 4 years straight and you're just sick to the back teeth of it. Or maybe you've been working the same 9-to-5 office job for a few years now and you just want to change. You want to do something different to get that excitement and passion back. Now, this is a dangerous place to be because you're always going to, at some point down the line, become bored of your life, right? To become exceptionally skilled at your craft, you really need to narrow down your skill set and be refining that small set of skills every single day for years. You can't become an expert at everything. There's just way too much information, too much knowledge out there to learn. And that's why it's so important to specialize. But when you do specialize, after years of doing the same thing, it does get boring. And I get it, I've been there. I was making the same generic study motivation videos for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, every single week, just pumping out the same video. And you can see for yourself, you can scroll down the videos on my channel and you'll see the same video again and again and again. And I'll be honest, I got bored. I lost all creativity. I completely lost motivation. And the irony isn't lost on me. I was pumping out motivation videos every week, but at the same time, I myself had no motivation. So what did I do about it? I made the biggest pivot, the biggest change in my business career, at least up until that point. And within literally, I'd say less than a week of making that one decision, I was back at full motivation, so passionate about my YouTube channel again. And it was so kind of refreshing to have that energy and passion back, just like when I first started the channel. And I'll go through the pivot and the decision-making process later on in the video. But first, I want to tell you a quick story about a student that enrolled in the Transform Your Grades in 30 Days course earlier last year. So this student, he was from the US, he was 19 or 20 years old, maybe very early 20s, and he'd been studying law for the last 4 years, and he was about 6 months away from graduating. Now, he enrolled in the Transform Your Grades course because he had lost all motivation. He had his final exams coming in about 6 months, but he just couldn't find the energy to drag himself to his desk and study for them because he was sick to death of studying law and he wanted to become a pilot. He wanted to quit his studying, throw away his 3.5-4 years of studying for law and start studying to become a pilot. Now, that's a problem right there, a massive problem. You can't just keep quitting the path that you're traveling down every time you get bored, because in the next 30 or 40 years, you're gonna get bored a lot. That's just life, it is what it is. So imagine every time you get bored, you change direction, you reset, you throw all your experience and knowledge in that industry away, and you start again from scratch. You'll be competing against people that have been in that new industry for decades, and you're going to kind of try and beat them with no experience and no knowledge. It's like, if you imagine a graph, over time, the more experience you gain in that area, the more successful you'll be. But then when you get bored, your experience and the speed at which you learn will probably start to plateau. And this is for 2 reasons. The more knowledgeable and skilled you become in one field, the harder it is to learn new things. But secondly, because you're just not as passionate as you once were compared with when you first started. At this point, you can do 2 things. You can pivot, in which case there will be a slight drop in progress while you learn a new skill set to complement the experience that you already have. And the second option is you hit the reset button and you start from scratch. And every time you hit that reset button, you go back to 0. But at the same time, you do need to change something. You need to change something big, because if you have no motivation and you continue to keep doing what you've always been doing, you're going to get the same results, right? So instead of hitting the reset button, what you need to do is pivot. So what does that mean? It means 2 things. Firstly, and I'm going to use the example of the law student I just mentioned, instead of him completely quitting law to become a pilot, a more sensible pivot, at least in my opinion, would be to complete his law degree, but then do a master's in aviation law. Therefore, he'd be utilizing his 3.5 years of law experience and knowledge, and he can use that to enter the aviation field, where he can then study a field that he's more passionate about. And he can even start working on obtaining his pilot license outside of work. Alex Hormozi, who is an entrepreneur turning over about $90 million a year, over on his YouTube channel, explained it really well.
So many entrepreneurs, myself included, right? And I made this mistake so many times earlier on in my career. We desire novelty, we desire challenges, we want growth, right? But the thing is that we think growth means new, when I think that a lot of times we could redefine growth as meaning we develop the character traits to be able to persist and continue to do the same things over and over again. You don't see these real estate moguls, for example, being like, man, I've built, $20 million in real estate. I kind of just need a challenge. I'm going to start a restaurant, right? They don't do that. I mean, think about how stupid that would sound to you. You're like, dude, you're so good at real estate. Just keep doing real estate, right?
There are other ways to pivot without destroying your career too. Again, using the law student as an example, he could study aviation law for his masters. He could become a sky marshal whose main job is to counter aircraft hijackings. He could start his own law business. He could challenge himself outside his work by starting a new sport like paragliding. Again, scratching that itch of wanting to fly and enter the aviation industry. And like I said, this particular student enrolled in the Transform Your Grades in 30 Days course, and I helped him pivot, and I stay in contact with him to this day, and he's in a far, far better place now than he was when he first enrolled. Partly because throughout the course I teach actionable strategies that you can implement into your life to help you climb out of that trap of kind of being bored and having no motivation. I won't talk too much about it, you can check the link down below. We're running a New Year sale, 64% off the full price, which we've never had that big of a discount before, so grab it before it goes. But secondly, because he did make that pivot and he was able to scratch that itch that he was having. So I'll go back to the analogy I mentioned at the beginning of this video where I talked about being bored with the motivation videos I was making for 4 years straight. I didn't just hit the reset button and start a completely new business. I didn't even start a new YouTube channel. What I did was I pivoted. I bought a camera, I bought a microphone, I bought some lighting, and completely changed how I made my videos. Now, they were terrible. When I first started talking to the camera, those videos were really awful. I knew nothing about videography. I knew nothing about lighting, about how to present to the camera. 2 years ago, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics and finance. I spent £40,000 and 3 years of my life to get it. I don't intend on ever using that degree. However, going to university was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Confused? Let me explain. But I set out each video to just get 1% better every video, and over the course of a year, making those incremental improvements, my videos started to get better and better. I think the main message in this video is if you are bored, and I mean bored long term with what you're doing, whether it's studying or working or whatever, life is just too short to continue being bored. Because before you know it, you'll be middle-aged and wondering where your life went, right? So I think it's really important to take a step back, rethink what you actually want in your life, what would actually make it more interesting, and how you can get that kind of excitement back. Because being able to pivot successfully is an incredibly important life skill to have. And look, I'm not saying never hit the reset button. Life isn't as black and white as that. But I think for most people, you need to be very strategic with when you pivot and when you completely reset. Now, if you are bored with your life and you want to take actionable steps to kind of regain that passion and excitement back, you should absolutely check out the video I made recently called The #1 Golden Rule That Transformed My Life. If you have no motivation, I mean, if you're feeling uninspired and unmotivated long term, trust me, you need to watch that video. You can click on the card on the screen. Alternatively, I made another video called The Single Easiest Way to Level Up Your Life. Again, you can click on the card on the screen, and whichever video you choose, I'll see you over there.